Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to wait for just a few minutes for folks to come into our room here. But if you have not been to an ArtCloud webinar before, my name is Megan Schaefer. I'm the creative director of ArtCloud, and I am so incredibly excited for today's session. As people who maybe have been to our webinars before, often they're very product heavy, and we're talking about tech best practices for the art world. But today we have something a little bit different, something I've been looking forward to for months with three very, very smart gallery people. And we will be talking about brass tacks with 2025, existing as an art gallery in the USA. So again, my name is Megan. My background is in the arts, but now I'm working in art tech. And so all these concepts are very close to my heart. If you have not known about ArtCloud before I go into a bit of housekeeping, I will do some introductions about just who ArtCloud is, what we make, what we provide to the art world. We have two primary products, the ArtCloud Manager, which is the business backend, in our inventory database, CRM, marketing and sales tools, and then our website builder, which connects to all of your inventory on the Manager backend. So if you have any questions about ArtCloud, obviously we are here to help. Support at ArtCloud or hello at ArtCloud is the place to go, the emails to use. For today's session, this is a recording, so it will be recorded. It's being recorded right now. You'll receive an email from me in the next few days with any follow-up information that's pertinent from the event, and some links and some fun stuff along with the recording should you want to watch it again on YouTube. That said, if you have any questions at all through our talk today, please throw them in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A for any questions you might have for our gallerists. So yeah, let's get started. Thanks again for being here. I'm going to start with some introductions for our three panelists today. I will start with Frank Rose, who is coming out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, middle of the country-ish. Frank is from Hecho, Mano, and it's a gallery in the downtown district of Santa Fe, prioritizing super handmade goods, very much process-driven, lots of printmaking, lots of ceramics, lots of different things, and we're really excited to hear from him. Up next, we have Mike Carroll from Schoolhouse Gallery in Provincetown, Massachusetts. He has been at Schoolhouse for over 2 decades. Fact check me, Mike.
That's right.
And they have represented so many artists over the years, so many wonderful contemporary artists, both emerging and established, as you can see. So we are looking forward to hearing from Mike. And last but not least, we have Bracken Sansbury from Art and Light Gallery in Greenville, South Carolina. So we've got 3 people from basically like a triangle of our nation with 3 very different cities, and that is by design. They have very different experiences. Bracken leads Art and Light in Greenville, South Carolina, which is about 3 hours from where I am right now, which is our headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. Which Bracken has been the director for over 8 years, curating contemporary Southern art, has grown the program significantly in that time, and we are really, really happy that she has agreed to speak with us today. Thank you, Bracken. So that said, we're just going to go launch, and we have 4 primary questions today. And it's going to be a very casual and organic conversation where our gallerists will start and answer these questions and volley the concept back and forth. And then at the end, we will be taking questions and do a Q&A. So if you have any questions at all about their program, about their background, their trajectory that has led them to the point of running and operating successful galleries, please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. I think it'll make the end of our conversation really that much more interesting. And then this conversation will be 30 to 40 minutes, but we'll leave some time. If we are hitting on some cool stuff, we will continue to speak up to an hour. So Again, if you need to leave, the recording will be sent to you, and I encourage you to revisit what I think is a cool conversation. Before we begin, I wanted to also note something that we talked about, these gallerists and I, a little earlier, about working for an art gallery, being the director, being in any capacity, and how it can feel pretty siloed and like pretty like the galleries just like don't really talk to each other quite as much as maybe other industries that have more formalized trade shows, or conferences, or professional development in a more standard sense. So I think this kind of program is something I am at least interested in doing more often, where purveyors of art dealers, gallerists, are able to come together and like ask each other questions and be able to feel a sense of community. At ArtCloud, we really value that. And we value that with our artists, with our galleries, and want to continue to provide programming like this that makes our customers and potential customers and the art world at large feel a little closer together. So if you have any suggestions, or if you would like to be on our next roundtable in the fall, please reach out to me. My email is megan@artcloud.com. So let's start with our first question. How has your gallery strategy evolved going into 2025? A very interesting year so far, if I may say so, especially in terms of programming, pricing, or audience engagement. Who wants to go first?
I feel like this year we are thinking about shows that are getting some of our highest selling artists out there a little bit more. We've noticed, a little bit of dip like most of us have in extraneous spending. And though many of us, because we work in the arts, believe that it is a vital part of the money that we spend, a lot of people don't understand that. So we're trying to make sure we're showcasing a lot of our artists that we know people love and want to collect. And we're also encouraging them to work in varying sizes. So if they're used to painting larger at a higher price point, we're talking to them about creating some things that are maybe a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to collect, where clients don't have to think too hard about it. So that's one thing.
Yeah, for us,
Go ahead.
I think, a lot of what we have been doing, we're just continuing to lean into it. And so we've been doing a lot of events that don't necessarily relate to the openings or the exhibitions or to commerce. So for example, in the wintertime, we started a movie night. So once a month, we would select an art-centric documentary. We bought a popcorn machine. It was free. And people came in, brought their own pillows and chairs, and hung out together for an hour and a half and watched a movie. So one of the things we've been thinking of is how do we just keep people coming into the building, regardless whether it's about sales or not, just keeping the energy moving. So that was one. We've had, quick draw events where we invite artists to come in and make works on the spot. People drink a little bit and watch people make art, and all of the drawings are made available under $100. So it's just kind of continuing to build energy, create energy, keep it moving.
Yeah, and for us, I think this is going to be a little less. My thought is a little less about actual sales strategies, because I did a couple of fairs this spring, and they're a lot of fun, and very high risk environments, and you're kind of always taking the temperature of the fair itself and the people that find you there. And what I heard at both of these fairs was a lot of uncertainty about the market this year, and a lot of kind of hesitation. And it led me to, sort of think about just coming into the gallery and keeping it really simple. I started to do, I was interviewed several years ago by someone who wanted to do an article about people in the Boston School, who some people may know from, art history a little bit, who I came up with in Boston. And during that interview, I realized that I had been putting art on people's walls since I was 19 years old. And it was started at punk rock concerts in Boston, where our friends were in a band and other people made art, and we just put it up in the background. And it was just this kind of expression of loving our friends, that really was what it was. And it kind of, some days, of course, it feels a little bit far away from that if you're orbiting into another area of the business. But I thought, that's never been different for me, actually, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back from these fairs and go to Provincetown and have pretty simple shows and just be with people in the space and really concentrate on the relationships that I have and the people that love to be in Provincetown and come and look at art. And, kind of very basic stuff, but it felt really like I could do that in the scale of my own experience, and it made a lot of sense. And that's what's been happening here. People are always, there's no such thing. I've never had a bad experience in an art gallery with a client. Like, they're never unhappy to be here. Not a lot can go wrong, you know. So I'm continuing to extrapolate on the highly pleasant circumstance around just being with people.
Mike, that's so true. One of the things that made me think about is really like we're in this because we love our artists, right? And we want to see them succeed. And that looks a lot of different ways. Yes, it is sales. That's important for us to keep doing what we love to do and also help support them in the big picture. But you're right, just like giving them a platform to show the things that they love to make and have other people experience that is really the core of why we do what we do. So staying true to that core, you really can't go wrong because it's infectious. People want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean, art galleries are a place that people go to drink and relax and see cool things and feel interesting and learn, hopefully learn something new. And I think the idea of art galleries being this third place, this community, like sort of a relatively gate kept community center, if you will. That's certainly how I feel about it. And I think that if you guys are doing your job well, which you do, it feels like somewhere that people can come in and feel like they're relaxed and ask questions, and feel that sense of, oh, it's a store for sure. We're not hiding that, but it's somewhere that you can also just go and hang and go to a movie night or go to a big group show. Like Bracken said, they've got it's a small work show, and this is the 19th one.
Yeah, in August, it's our anniversary show. Every year we've done small works to give people that don't have a big budget or don't have a lot of space the opportunity to collect works that they love at, smaller size and price point. So giving people the platform to do that's great.
Yeah, it's I would imagine difficult to keep that creativity up as a director and as a curator, as an event planner. That's what you guys are, is event producers, especially in right now, which is such a saturated, overstimulated time to be alive. So providing that place for people to actually be in person is more important than ever. This is what Bracken is talking about. This is the 16 version, I guess, a few years ago, right, Bracken?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so question 2. What role are interior designers or the design trade professionals playing in your business today, and how are you building those relationships?
So I guess I'll start this one too. We are really working a lot more with interior designers than we ever have, and that's strategic. We love our private collectors, of course, but interior designers come with a built-in repeat business. They always have new clients looking for art, and if we can make their life easier by finding pieces that might be in the gallery, they might be in our artist studios, or maybe we're helping the designer commission the perfect piece for the space. It's kind of a win-win. It makes their life easier. We're getting our artist business, and we get to put art in these beautifully designed spaces that we love to look at. And we have just found that to be really successful. So we have done a couple show homes with designers that have been really successful, where other designers then see the art and they're like, where did that come from? So they reach out. We've also done a couple marketing campaigns with mailers to introduce ourselves. And then of course, social media is a great way to connect with people. And I think that the design world hasn't always placed original art. It's sometimes felt like it's unattainable or too expensive, or maybe it's not the way designers can make money. But I think that that's changing. Designers are starting to see that original art is actually a really key and like cherry on top of the design thing to place. So yeah, that's one of our big things this year for sure.
Yeah, you guys do a great job on social media. Do you want to speak to any sort of evolving strategy around that? I know it's you don't want to give your secrets away, but how have you kind of kept up with the Joneses in that space in the last few years? You do a great job.
Well, thank you. You say evolving, it's ever evolving. We're constantly having to come up with something new all the time because eventually everybody starts kind of doing the same thing. And yes, that can be good. Sometimes it's frustrating. So we're just always trying to keep it fresh, but also do things that we know people love. Like Liz, my assistant gallery director, and I have been doing these coffee talks where once a month we have our little lattes and we sit in the gallery and we do a recording and we post it and we're talking about the current show and what we like about it. And people love it because Liz and I are weird. And when we get together, we can't help but laugh. And it's a way to be educational and fun without, like we were talking about before, like we want people to feel like the gallery is a comfortable place, right? And that's one of the big things we get is people walk in the door and they're like, "Hey, I know you." Even though we've never met, they feel a comfort level with us because we want that. We want people to come in and feel like it's accessible, and social media really helps us do that because we do just kind of put ourselves out there.
It's challenging for sure because I think the putting yourself out there is feels other than the art in my personal experience. I'm like, but here I am hosting a webinar, so obviously I'm fine with it. But
Together, it's one of those things where, yes, we're running a space that, we want to be intentional and we want to be beautiful and we want to be thoughtful. But the end goal is for us to be able to support ourselves and our artists. And so we have to find ways to do that. And I think that we're living in a much more casual world than it used to be, even in the art world. And so it's important for us to feel familiar to collectors. It makes them more comfortable and more willing to buy art.
Mhm.
I'll
Yeah,
second
for us.
that. On the, designer thing, we unfortunately haven't developed that part of our business very much. We've worked with a few designers, but in terms of creating the connections, I mean, what you're saying about social can be exhausting at times, but it really does pay off. Like you said, so many people come in and already feel like they have a relationship with us, and that's so valuable.
Yeah, for us, designers and the design industry have been very important. It was, now several years, there were a number of benefits kind of all across the board. And it started with me just kind of looking around one day and saying, I think a lot of galleries have a back room business, like a second stream of income or a patron. And I'm a small solo practitioner. I have neither of those. And so what am I going to do here? And I looked around and, Provincetown is a destination. It's a beach town. It's, there are not um, big luxury condominium towers or corporate collections or any of those kind of business type, um, sort of facilities for that kind of collecting or that kind of placements. And I thought, people here are building homes. This is about resonance, memory, shared experience. And, I think I want to learn about the design industry and how it can help me talk to people about how to build homes in this area. And I started to do things. For me, it was actually helpful to have an extreme season because I started to work on the design industry outreach off the main season. So I could have my, kind of quote unquote fine art program executed through exhibitions in the summer season. This was many years ago, but I started to do this perfect product, which no longer exists, which was called the Architectural Digest Home Show, had an art section called Made, which was very inexpensive. And I did a lot of outreach and it was wonderful. And at that time, this was years ago, and many of my artists were quite a good deal younger. And actually, it hurt. It was like pulling a band-aid off for them. But designers cared, I would say, more, if I had to make a comparison, about the outcome than their effort. They expected quality, they expected good quality, good reason, good results, good prices. They expected all of the basic components of a fine product to be in place. So this idea about trying hard and, sort of maybe meeting your expectations or not became something that they had to learn. They had to really learn to understand whether or not people were seeing what they were making the way they wanted it to be seen. So it became a kind of an exercise in functionality about art once it left the studio and then went through the gallery into somebody else's life. And it was great, and I do a lot of that work today. I think it's it's really educational. It's very hard to find artists that can use design industry's tools as a fine art paintbrush, if you will. And sometimes they overlap and bleed back and forth. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it isn't. But it's been very, very beneficial. And so I just sent out 2 ArtCloud emails today to designers about an opportunity that one of my artists just had. So
Speaking of expectations, I think I'll hop on this question that Laura Bledsoe popped in the chat, which I think it is a challenge. How are you managing designer expectations on discounts with inflation, rising prices? I'll add tariffs to the mix here for galleries and artists.
I feel like I can answer this too. So, we believe art has a value, right? So all of our artists have standard pricing. So it's the same pricing here as it would be in their studio, as it would be at any other gallery. And designers, I think there are kind of 2 schools to that. There's some of the old school designers that are just like, everything we do, it's 30% markup. It's not really how it can work with fine art, in my opinion. So we work with artists and kind of educate them on how the art industry works in tandem with what they do. So we have agreements with all of our artists. I think that's important to protect not only us, but our artists. So they have the expectations. And we do a 15% designer discount. And we split that with our artists, and the artists either agree to it or they don't. And we live within that world somewhere. We give them that option. I would say 99% of our artists are like, yeah, absolutely. That's cool. As long as they'll keep buying my work, that's what matters. So we talk to our designers about that, and they either get that in the form of a discount on the invoice if they're making the payment, or if their client's making the payment, we'll send them a commission for that 15%. That's how they're making money on the art. They can make money on framing. They can mark that up however they want. They can make money on their fabrics and their furniture and all of that, but the art kind of has that value attached. And if their clients are asking for discounts, then they can share that discount with their client. They can say, client, you get 5%, I'm going to take my 10. So we just kind of stick to that rule and make sure we're educating our designers on how we function in fairness to our artists.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Bracken. Mike, do you have anything to say about this question?
I think, it's right in line with what I do. I think for me, it's been, I don't know if you've had this experience or not, Bracken, but what happened with me as I began my life of working with design industry people is that I found that people who were marking up were not people that wanted to deal with me anyway. And so I began to deal with people who had contracts where they were just, the contract was solid and they weren't depending upon individual item markups. And that was the doorway into fine art in their clients' homes. Because as you probably know, there's a lot of filters that kind of you have to go through to provide art for someone. My wife and I, you can do everything in the house, but my wife and I travel and we choose art when we travel. We'll handle that part. This belonged to my parents, so this is going to go in the house and we have one piece left. So the art is so personal, that what happened for me is that the individual markup people just didn't stick around.
Right.
And the people that work on those overall contracts that are just one signature are people that I deal with more often.
That's a good point. Yeah, fee-based versus those
Yeah.
markups. That is a great point. I mean, I think people still won't stray away for asking for a discount, but it's probably certainly a little easier.
Oh, they always expect, I think they still expect a discount, which they should be given. It's a direct artery to a placement.
Mhm.
It's a time saver. And also they are looking at what you're doing without you asking, and they'll return without you asking again. So it's a great relationship and it's worth the discount for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Next question, y'all. How are you thinking about lower priced works or accessible pieces at scale in 2025, including editions, prints, or smaller pieces?
Well, since our gallery deals with a lot of prints, I'll start with that one. We started off working with printmaking as our primary medium. So we started in 2019, And part of that was just the opportunity that was available in terms of my relationships and seeing what was being shown in Santa Fe. And also, what I could do as a single person running a business at the time. So it was a little bit fortuitous, but we've really just ran with it. And printmaking continues to be the core of our business, though we've expanded, to include painting and sculpture and other media. People really associate us with printmaking, and we work with a lot of printmakers. The majority of our printmakers have work that starts at $50. It can go into the thousands, but for one example, we did a print fair in Brooklyn back in March, and we ended up, doing about 30,000 gross in a weekend, and our average sale price was about $200. So for us, it's really about the accessibility and promoting that. And, one of the things that worked to our advantage during COVID was that print a lot of times translates to monitors pretty well. It's usually pretty flat in terms of it, especially like lino cut, wood cut, very graphic, hard edge pieces. So it translates online really well. So we do a lot of online business, and to a lot of first time buyers who have never been to the gallery, who have, never seen the work in person. And so that really works for us. And the cat wants to get involved. So, lower points continue to really function well, and it helps us stand out too in Santa Fe, both in terms of content and in price point. It allows us to, especially for younger travelers that might want a piece of original art but don't have a multi-$1,000 budget or even a $500 budget, but they can come home with a unique original print. So that's been really, really perfect for us, both starting out and continuing to navigate, this crazy world.
I think when Teresa Roche first opened this gallery, the goal was to have really incredible art at price points that anybody can access. And we've sort of stayed true to that, even though we've grown and we now have things that are in the multiple thousands of dollars. And our inventory, we still have those little things, like Frank, you were saying, like we have these little bird blocks that go for $45. And kids getting their mom a Mother's Day gift, it becomes a tradition, and they come in, every Mother's Day, and that's what they give their mom, and they do it for 18 plus years. And it's like, it's really nice to have those multiple price points. And I think, again, in a year like this, when people are being a little bit more conscious about what they're spending, staying true to that has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, I think it's really fostering long-term relationships with collectors, especially if they're just starting out and maybe they've never been into a gallery. Maybe they feel intimidated by galleries. It can feel like a very opaque space sometimes. So if they can come in there, spend $50, and over the course of their lifetime, if they keep coming back, continue to explore and collect other artists and other media and different price points. And I think it's a really wonderful way to create longevity and expansiveness in your collectors.
Yeah, and very important for the artist practice. That's sort of where I have two thoughts on this. One is that I strongly disagree with the messaging from the media space about art galleries becoming redundant and people can buy things online, and people don't care about art anymore, homes are different, and the ideas about safety, comfort, and beauty have changed. I think art galleries have a particular function that's really vital, which is that they're holding space for people in the act of looking, which is one of the times in our lives when we're simply at our best, and I think people know that, whether they speak about it or it's tangible or not. I think that happens. And I always want this place to feel welcoming and possible for people. But what I tell my artists is that, you should think about, money is just a language to talk to the people that are going to live with your art. it's a very popular language, and it's really loaded with lots of preconceptions and information, but it's a language of exchange. So think about who you're making this stuff for. You know, if you have a public facing practice and you're not just putting stuff in the basement after you make it, you know, there's a story after you finish telling yours, and who is it for? So, you know, if you end up raising your prices because of one reason or another, what about that young couple that comes into the gallery that didn't know it was a gallery and happened to find something they liked and can't start that way? Not only are you going to miss having a conversation with that couple, but also you're going to end up having to make work for auctions. You know, because that, which are, in my view, extremely destructive situations. And so, you know, people are going to, you know, once you have a certain reputation, people are going to ask you for work for auctions. You're going to have to start to give to auctions the work that you might be placing with young collectors who are interested in starting to get to know your work. I don't think it's, I think it's wise to have a variety, to offer a variety of experiences if you can. You know, that's not about, you know, sort of uh, people who are well into their career. That's a different animal. But the idea of what possibility can provide and how pricing can talk about that is vital, I think, you know.
I think that's why,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Frank.
I was just going to say that, you know, I think especially in a place like Santa Fe, that is a heavily tourist environment that is so saturated with galleries, people are really delighted to find that they can purchase artwork, and they probably thought that they couldn't when they were traveling. You know, it really, I think, creates such a feeling of goodwill, that turns people into considering themselves as collectors. You know, there's people that buy from us multiple times that say, "Oh, I'm not a collector," and I'm like, "Well, okay, but you just bought 5 pieces from us in the past couple of years. What does that make you?" You know, so it's a cool experience to see people kind of like just naturally get into it.
I was going to say that that's a great role of gallerist and purveyor of art, because the artist, like having that intermediary of you guys that to do the education and set the tone and the vibe of the atmosphere and the environment is really important. I think you know, some artists are artist gallerists, we all know them, but it's really important to have an intermediary, someone who can say, yes, you can afford this. This is how I'd recommend framing it. You know, what is, how do you feel? Who are you? That is y'all's role, is stewards of those experiences. And then I love the idea of the language of money. I find artists especially are not comfortable talking about money quite as much, and so to put those words to it, to like call it a language and just a vehicle for exchange as opposed to like this icky sticky thing, is really smart. And I'm gonna steal that from you, Mike. So um, great. Thank you guys so much. These are, you know, you're giving us wonderful insights, and I'm sure I see our attendees are a collection of gallerists that that I know that are customers, and some great people in the art space. So I'm sure they're like nodding their heads along with what you're talking about. But yeah, let's go to question 4. How do you plan your calendar now, and what are you doing to stay visible or relevant during quieter times of the year?
I think I can start this one because Provincetown is so calendar driven. You know, it's a historical art colony with a very short summer season, and has for many years sort of relied on and been encumbered by that short season, you know, and it's quite different now because of the way things have changed, nicely so. But you know, I think of it as a piece of community theater. You know, I have to have everything planned. I have to have everything intended by January and everything planned by March. And my lines memorized by May, and I just have to kind of execute the whole thing all summer because the shows are kind of short, they're quick. But what I'll talk about is something that you mentioned before, Megan, which is about people talking to each other. Because one of the things that actually does happen here it is a kind of a result of a short season and people kind of getting through it together, struggling through kind of a big event together. But there's a wonderful situation in Provincetown called the Provincetown Art Gallery Association, which was formed during the pandemic by all the galleries to try and tell people how to come to Provincetown and be in galleries safely and how to get here. It was instructional, but it became this cohort of small business people that that continue to meet and share information about shippers and various kind of mechanical things, and even they're quite frank and honest about how they're doing. We do a check-in on all these meetings, so it's a wonderful conversation that diffuses tension and self-consciousness. And we run something called the Provincetown Gallery Stroll, which is a Friday evening stroll. We've expanded the cohort of galleries to include .orgs, the museums that are here, and also municipal organizations, so we can expand our demographic impact with advertising through, like the state of Massachusetts, which would not necessarily pay attention to us without those kinds of partners. And we have this wonderful kind of shared kind of wayfinding experience every Friday night all season from Memorial Day to Indigenous Peoples Weekend, where people are just saying, "What are you doing? Where's the stroll? Where's my wine? What's going on here?" And so that way of executing a season where you're making it somewhat of a shared experience or increasing the visibility and vitality is wonderful. And then what I do about staying visible in the quieter times of year is I'm just very stubborn and insistent. I do fairs. I try to get into people's houses. I stay in touch with my clients. I send them notes and reminders. I try not to be a pest, but I really try to understand the value of the relationships and what people are bringing to me. I consider my life as an art gallerist a gift to me from people that made these suggestions and offered me opportunities. And I try to remember that's how I want my clients to feel. I want them to feel this kind of specialness, this kind of hand holding that just is about reminding them of things and being in dialogue, and they bring the results. I don't run to people's houses with my business card and a painting under my arm. I just don't do that way. So, these people get to ask me things because I'm trying to be perpetually available. That's the way I do
I love your metaphors, Mike.
it.
I love the theater production metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have somewhat of a seasonal environment here. Pretty much the first half of the year is fairly quiet. August to December is pretty busy, but January through April, May is pretty quiet. And we've just started kind of dipping our toes a little bit into fairs, other types of events to kind of help round that out. A lot of communication, like you said, Mike, really kind of staying on what I feel is our most valuable asset in that regard, is our client list. So whether more so than advertising, more so than social media and any other kind of marketing, the people that have already bought from us, so staying on that. But it's tricky. I mean, we are reliant, to a large degree on the traffic coming in the door. So, yeah, that's how we're negotiating it.
We have a couple of great questions to kick off this Q&A section. It's 3:39 now. Got a few more minutes left. I know our panelists have a little bit more time to spend with us, so I will start. Ron is asking, how have you explored other non-traditional, non-retail environments in which to sell, like customer viewing suites, pop-up galleries, and other venues?
So we do every quarter, we work with, let me preface this with, I don't love restaurant art. I have a problem with it. I've been there and done it a million times. However, there is a really great artful restaurant just down the street from us. And they're called the Anchorage. Their food is incredible. They believe in art. They're in the neighborhood, and our little neighborhood is called the Village of West Greenville, and it's meant to be an artsy community. And we quarterly rotate out their art. It's like 5 pieces, so it's not a whole lot of stress. It's not like, 700 pieces all hung like this with tags on it. And we do an artist Q&A with whoever our featured artist is, and it's ticketed. And the Anchorage comes up with a art-inspired cocktail that we serve along with some small bites from the restaurant. Some work really well, some don't connect as well. A lot of it just depends on what's going on in the world. Like we have a talk this Thursday and we haven't sold out all the tickets, but it's also because everybody's gearing up to go out of town for the 4th. And in Greenville, everybody goes to the beach or to the mountains. So there are some things like that that we have to contend with, but we have found that it's just nice to partner with another space on a low key level that doesn't take a lot of labor, doesn't take a lot of our bandwidth, and it's just quarterly and it gets the work out there. We have QR codes, just, little nondescript QR codes, and we can see that there is traffic that comes to our website from the restaurant. Doesn't always equate in an automatic sale, but a lot of times it'll get people over here or at least increase awareness of us. The other thing that we do occasionally is, like I was saying, those artist show homes where we are their partnered gallery and we help provide the art for those show homes. So those are kind of the two things that we do outside of the 4 walls. We haven't done any of the online things like that though, so can't speak to that.
That sounds really smart, Bracken, and finding a particular restaurant or partner that you can have an ongoing relationship with. We've done a little bit of that, tried a few different things that always felt like more work than was worth, whether it's the parade of homes, sort of showcasing different homes around town that they bring people to and putting work into a house and kind of end up with like, well, that was a day. But I like that idea of finding somebody maybe who has sort of overlap with your aesthetic or ethos. That's a great idea.
Just being selective about where you're putting your extra time. And I think, having done this for a long time now, I've, done a lot of things and failed at a lot of things and learned from a lot of things. You just have to figure out what works. And if it's not working, find another thing to focus on. You only have so many hours in the day.
I think with stuff like that too, I think I've done a lot of that stuff, and it's the value for me in retrospect is to recognize when there's a need for expansion. I think that really the idea of putting art in a restaurant, I've done pop-ups. The best things I've done are having exhibitions in other spaces that are like, we had a very successful exhibition in an architect's building that had an art gallery in it, then got press in the city it was in, these sorts of things. And that led directly to sales. But most of those things have to do with what I make out of them in publicity and promotion. If I have a set of my clients that are deaccessioning and downsizing, I need to recognize that there's a need for expansion and including like looking like I'm kind of active and possible at that point. And they often don't lead directly to sales. Like, here's a metaphor for you, Frank. People ask me what I do for a living, and I say, I pet the cat and the lights go on. Like, the sales from those things are like a total non sequitur, but somehow they're related to me having expanded the space where I can be found and talk about the artists I work with. And that's, to me, is the value. If you can do it and you have the muscle and the time, fine. If you can't, it's, skip it and have a good day,
Well, my cat approves of that job description.
We saw a little cameo of them walking behind you before, so
They want to get in on it.
they do. All right, this is an interesting one. So how are you managing, if you're managing international sales with tariffs, high currency exchange, duties? Are you lowering prices to help kind of counteract? Are you staying firm and losing the sale? Do you guys have any experience with that?
We are very clear from the beginning that the client is responsible for any duties, taxes coming into the country. So, it's not something that I want to, carve out of when we make a sale. The most I think we'll do on something like that is maybe split shipping costs. But, if somebody's traveling to Santa Fe from London, they know it's going to be expensive to ship. They know they're going to have to pay taxes when they import. So I just I don't take any of that on. But we also, in terms of tariffs, we do import a lot from Mexico. And so far, we have not received a tariff bill. And I don't know, I'm not asking questions until, like, as long as we're not getting a bill, I'm not gonna ask why. I think there may be an exemption for craft media. So, we import a lot of pottery, and so that we've never had any tariffs with that. So I don't know. I haven't experienced tariffs quite yet.
Yeah, I don't end up doing a lot of that because I won't assume the costs. It's a lot of time to put a whole transaction like that together and arrange the shipping and transport. And ordinarily, with the price point of the work that I sell in place, when people in, say, Europe, for example, hear the cost of shipping, they generally are out. And I don't concede that. That's not. I don't want to do that to my artists. That's too much of an ask, for a discount. So.
Yeah.
And Abby also says, with artists raising their costs for their incurred costs for materials, bronze, wood, for framing, things like that. I mean, I'm sure that happens because things are more expensive than they've been in a long time. Do you guys have conversations with your artists about that?
We've had maybe a couple small conversations. Most of our artists, we don't do a whole lot of sculpture or dealing with like steel and metal. So we've had like some raises in canvas pricing or panel pricing. In which case most of these artists, it's time to raise their prices 10-ish% anyway. And a lot of times that's going to cover their costs. So if it's time for an artist to raise their costs and it's not going to totally price them out in some crazy way, I'm all for eking it up a little bit to make sure that the artist is, really covering what they need to cover. So that's always my suggestion is if your costs are going up as an artist, then price needs to raise if sales will allow for it.
Yeah, I think you just have to roll with it. We experienced it with a couple jewelry makers that use gold in their work, and gold has gone crazy. One of them, there is an artist that decided they wanted to work more with gold and phase out their silver, and we primarily sold their silver work. And so, reluctantly, we decided not to work with that artist because we just weren't finding the market for their gold work. There's another artist that we work with that we do sell their gold work, and her prices have gone through the roof, but they continue to sell. So I think it's really just flowing with what's working, and being willing to make the adjustments where needed, but also knowing that artists have to cover their costs. It's like that if they need to raise their prices to make sure they're getting paid, then I think it's important that we roll with that.
Yeah, and I don't know about you both, but at least in my little world here, I'm the last person that has raised prices of any kind of small business that I've interacted with in the last year. Everything is more expensive, and I'm just, if you're risk adverse in a high risk environment, then it feels weird to raise prices. But what I talk to my artists and I say, well, if you think it's time to raise prices, there is a criterion for raising prices. Some of it is cost of materials, but other things are, a museum exhibition, a placement in a collection, a publication that's not a magazine. There are things that people understand as reasons to raise prices in the career front on the marketplace. And if they're hesitant about it, I say to them, well, you're changing your focus on who your collector is. If you raise your prices significantly, fewer people are going to buy your art less often, but they may be more serious collectors who have a budget for collecting. So decide if you want that, and then if it happens to be that you and I, the artist in the gallery, are waiting too long for those people, those floating islands to show up to make those particular kinds of purchases, you may need to find another gallery because that might be a better fit. That's just it's the hard fact of it, you know. But I do know a lot of people. I co-broke with galleries in New York, and they're raising prices. Like first they were terrified this year because they were very uncertain about the economy, but then they went ahead and raised prices, and people didn't seem to have a problem with it so far. They've been very successful placing work at the higher prices in these other galleries. So
Got a lot of floating islands. I like that
not
one
floating
too. You're
islands.
full of them, Mike. Um, so last question before I let everyone go. Are you seeing any increase in online sales? And are you investing in reaching out to audiences outside of your area? And I'll add, and how.
Yeah, we do a lot of online biz, and like I said, it's primarily through the print media, um, and typically it's under $500 is the price point. We do quite a bit of ads through social media, um, specifically advertising the printmaking, and so that really helps create a little bit of that smoothness on slow days. To have a couple sales come in online, even if it's just a few $100s, is like the difference between a few $100s and a zero is amazing. And so, but then it's also, it's like that's a new client, you know. So we do invest into Facebook and Instagram advertising, and that helps a lot.
I would say the same here. We do a lot of Instagram, Facebook, more for like reach and like awareness to try to get people to like follow our page and then see what we're doing and start to interact that way. And you know, when we got ArtCloud in 2019 or the first of 2020, right before everything went to hell, we did start to see that increase in online sales because it's seamless. You've got your point of sale right there with your website, and everything is, you know, marks it as sold. It moves it over to another page, whatever it is. It just makes it a lot easier for the client to see what's available, what's not available. And that trend has continued. I would say that we're about 25% online. And again, like you were saying, Frank, it's smaller things typically, but it's also great because it allows people to see all of our inventory. And if they're not comfortable just clicking and buying now, they can text us. We'll send them pictures, we'll send them video, we'll do virtual installs, we'll do all of these things to help push that sale through. But having that online presence is really what helps us get there. So I don't know that it's an increase in online sales, but it's a consistent thing for us.
For
Yeah.
us, it's I'll be quick because we're running out of time, but it's I almost never sell anything online from a button. But almost everything that we place has an online component. You know, it's very different. And it did, you know, talking about ArtCloud, it became extremely different for us when I went to ArtCloud because it's so much quicker. There was another whole level of visibility. I get very frequently, I get, you know, sort of spontaneous requests for information about pieces of art from people I don't know already. So all of that is wonderful, but there's a people want to be in front of it for a minute. I think, you know, especially if it's, you know, $10,000 or $15,000, they're not going to really buy that online without having that kind of full experience of really seeing if it looks like what it's supposed to look like and feels like what it's supposed to feel like. But most of the conversation about it is all online, and the way that we can kind of provide more information and detail and enrich the experiences through the web for sure, you know.
It's really smart. And we talk about this a lot in our last gallery webinar, which was about website best practices. That's on our YouTube page as well. But I think what you said, Mike, is really smart and true, where even if you're not selling the piece by someone pressing buy now, like there's not an e-commerce component, every piece needs to have visibility on the internet.
Yeah.
You need to have every artist show up on the internet. They have to have web presence, or else, you know, people, you know, how often do you go to your phone and look something up after you saw it in person? And that's kind of what leads you to making a purchase even 6 months in the future. So yeah, it's as important as it's ever been. especially after COVID, right? Kind of changed the nature of e-commerce as a concept. I will end because I've thrown every question out except for Will's. What about corporate sales? Can you speak to that just very briefly? Anybody?
Well, right now,
Nope,
you go.
We primarily have found corporate sales through outside events. So, for example, the Brooklyn Fair that we did, we got more corporate sales through that than anything we've done in the 5 years prior. So, getting out in front of a brand new audience is what did it for us. We really haven't had. That's actually not true. We did have another artist that had an existing relationship. So again, I think it's about, broadening the scope of your audience and putting yourself in front of opportunities where they're kind of coming and getting that exposure.
Yeah, going to different places that aren't just your gallery space to start to form those relationships. Even though especially fairs, I know that a lot of gallerists are like, this is flushing a lot of money down the drain. Like, oh my God, this is wild. But yeah, that's where those types of things happen. That's where some more of the visibility exists. And not your own. Well, with that said, guys, thank you so much for being here. You three have been a delight to work with and speak to. And I know all of you guys are on ArtCloud, and our team loves working with you. So thanks again for being on ArtCloud. And thank you for agreeing to speak today. I think, like I said, starting out, it can feel like a siloed job, but you guys are, with all of our registrants and customers, non-customers are experiencing similar problems and similar joys as well. That said, if you don't use ArtCloud, start a free trial, sign up for free. You get a free ArtCloud account up to 500 pieces. And we would love to speak with you. And then for all the customers that I see on the call, thank you so much for using ArtCloud. And if you need any support, you know where to go. Thank you again. And you will get an email from me in a couple days here with the recording. Bye, Kitty. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your day, and let's sell some more art.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you.